Hi, good morning. I hope all is well. I am continuing to answer your questions. Most of the questions are coming from readers of You Are the Universe, Discovering Your Cosmic Self and Why It Matters. I thank you tremendously for supporting this book and expanding our conversation. So today's question comes from Jet Thurman. Jet Thurman. She is a teacher and healer and has been coming to Chopra Center courses for many years and is also a Chopra Center certified teacher. And she is saying to me, she said, "Hi Deepak, I refer to your Facebook video where you talk about how to deal with criticism. In that connection, I refer to my email to you from 18/11/2017, where I talk about your very angry reaction on Bold TV on that date when you were being attacked. It seems to me you are still not able to walk your own talk." Jet. So thank you, Jet, for that comment and for that observation and for reminding me that I cannot walk my own talk. It has been said that we mostly talk about things that we learn, that we need to learn ourselves. So thank you for reminding me of that. Now I don't know how many of you remember or saw the interview on Bold TV. You can find it if you go on the internet and you type out Deepak Chopra on Bold TV talking about Neil deGrasse, then you will find that interview. And that is if you have the time, ability or desire to do that. You may not be interested. But if you are, then just type out, go to the internet, Google it, Bold TV, B-O-L-D TV, and type out Deepak Chopra on Bold TV talking about Neil deGrasse. So let me share the context with you before I address the bigger question, which is, if ego is the enemy, how do we overcome it? Neil deGrasse Tyson, that's right. Neil deGrasse Tyson. He's a cosmologist, he's very popular. He has his own show. I think sooner or later I'll be on the show as well. So before I address this question on how to deal with this whole issue of ego, let me actually ask any of you to go on that and see if I was really angry. Neil deGrasse had attacked me on a previous show for being a pseudoscientist, or words to that effect, and so I was invited actually to the show to address that. I was invited to the show to address that, so I was addressing that. I did not realize that some would perceive that as anger, but be it as it may, Jet has a point. She thought I was being angry, actually very angry, that my reaction was very angry, and that I was not able to walk my own talk. So thank you very much, Jet, for pointing that out, and hopefully that little bit of criticism from you will improve my behavior in the future. So I will do my best, I promise. Now, if ego is the enemy, then how do we overcome it? That was the topic that I wanted to address based on Jet Thurman's wonderful comment and question. So more on that in 15 seconds. So I'm back here. And so here's the question we wanted to address today. If ego is the enemy, then how do we overcome it? It's a fascinating question, and it's a question that comes up all the time for all of us that are trying to find our true self. So first of all, ego is a construct, as by now everyone who's in these conversations knows. It actually has no fundamental reality. It's a self-image that is constructed socially and usually in childhood. So, in childhood we are given a name, a nationality, a religion, an identity, economic identity, a cultural identity, a social identity, and then we build it up till we sacrifice our true self for our self-image, which is the ego. And then we spend, those of us who are on a spiritual quest, a spiritual path, spend the rest of our life trying to overcome it. The first thing to understand, of course, is that being a construct, the ego identity is a fiction. It's a fiction, and it is living in a body, this body, which is also a fiction, and then inhabiting a world that is also a fiction. By fiction, I mean it has no true identity. That which you call me and mine, a personal self inhabiting a personal body in a world, is all a projection, a localized projection of the non-local self. If you go inside this body, there's no little Deepak looking out through these eyes and this brain. This body itself is a recycling of earth, water, and air, and space. And then the world that I see is also exactly the same. It's basically looked upon objectively, atoms and molecules, which when you get down to it is basically probability waves in an infinite void. So your body is proportionately as void as intergalactic space, and so is the world that you look at proportionately as void as intergalactic space, and that which you call me and mine inside this body doesn't actually exist. So we are all basically nothing experiencing everything. We are the nothingness that experiences the everythingness. I think the closest we can come to defining who we are, who this is, the closest we can come to defining what this is that we as a body-mind are a unique activity of the total universe. We as a body-mind are a unique activity of the total universe. That the true self, which is really, for lack of a better word, the true self is the one consciousness experiencing itself as the universe. But that one consciousness experiences itself in infinite variations. Infinite variations. So this is the one self expressing itself uniquely, and also in endless variations. This is the one self experiencing itself uniquely as this, currently impermanently called Deepak Chopra, but ultimately experiencing itself in endless variations. Just to think about that is very liberating. Just to think about that is very, very liberating. But then how do we go finding this true self? And one of the things that spiritual traditions teach us is by going beyond the ego self, this limited identity, which is a fiction in a fictional body experiencing a fictional universe. The reason I say it's fictional is it's a projection, a human projection, a cultural projection, a religious projection of the conditioned mind anyway. So how do we overcome this ego, and how do we vanquish it, and how do we ultimately conquer it? And I think in order to address that, the first question that could be asked is, who is it or what is it that wants to conquer the ego? And if you will really think about it a little bit, you'll realize that conquering the ego is the ultimate melodrama of the ego. So the ego cannot conquer the ego, because the very concept of conquering the ego is the melodrama of the ego, which, as I said, is a fiction. Okay, which, as I said, is a fiction. Aurora just pointed out the relative self. I think that's a good word. So, first of all, that's the big question. Can the ego conquer the ego? Can a fiction conquer the fiction? The answer should be obvious. And then the second question is, what is the reason for conquering the ego? And if you say the reason for the conquering the ego is to feel good about the spiritual self, then that is also the ego. Okay? So this becomes a big conundrum. Can a fictional, melodramatic self conquer the self? Aurora is saying, ha ha. Yeah, it's very funny actually. This whole thing about conquering the ego is a very funny experience. Now, here's what I've found after thinking a lot about it. Thinking a lot about it, doing a lot of meditation on it, and ultimately coming to a conclusion. Whether you buy that conclusion or not is up to you. But I will share it with you anyway. So that which we call the ego, which has created a construct called the body-mind, and this perceptual experience that we call the world, it's a contracted self. It's a contraction of the universal self. This and this that I experience is a finite experience of the infinite self. This body-mind is a finite experience of the infinite self. Now, therefore it's a contraction. When we allow that contraction to relax through non-resistance, through being present to presence, then the contracted self basically settles into the expanded self. Now, based on this, there's an insight. The more contracted you feel, the more that ego identity is dominating as an experience. So that contraction usually shows up as a sensation. And it's a physical sensation. It's a physical sensation. Next time you feel defensive, you feel angry, you feel upset, you feel resentful, you feel judgmental, you feel hostility, you feel guilt, you feel shame, you feel grief, not grief but depression. Notice that your body has this feeling of contraction as a sensation. So what I have found is that if one is disciplined enough, and maybe that day I wasn't, maybe, I don't know if I was angry or not, I don't even remember the whole experience clearly, but we can go on the internet and check it out, although for me it's over. But if you understand that this ego is a sensation, a contraction that can be felt, then just by bringing awareness into this contraction, it slowly starts to soften, melt, and ultimately dissolve. So that's a simple process actually. Feel the contraction, feel the sensation, which is what the ego self is, and keep feeling it, bringing awareness to it. Awareness brings healing till it softens, till it is engulfed in the infinite being or awareness, and till it dissolves. And if you can make a discipline out of this and make even a habit out of this, then ultimately it will dissolve. And the experience of that will be flow. It'll be flow. No resistance, no anticipation, no regrets. Just this moment as it is. Lightness of being. Lightness of being. And this lightness of being is a very joyful experience. It is what is frequently referred to as Sat Chit Ananda. Sat means truth, Chit awareness of being, Ananda of the nature of joy or bliss. So I hope that answer is helpful to some of you. Maybe it is, maybe it's not, but if you've ever experienced flow, then you will long to experience it again. And this is maybe one of those ways to do it, bringing awareness to contraction, to this uncomfortable sensation that we call the ego. Okay, thanks again, and keep sending questions at the following email address. Jayo is the website, so jayo.com is the website. Jayo is also our app, which I hope you're downloading and using. But the email address is info@jayo.com. And I will continue to respond as I get your questions. It's nice to see all friendly people here, Aurora and Derek and Michael, and yes, Aurora, it's a sensation. It's just an uncomfortable sensation, the ego. Thinking about it actually makes me laugh, how serious we get about seriousness of the ego. So one of the things is also to get rid of the seriousness, because you'll notice that the more serious people are, the more their ego dominates their behavior. We as spirit are playful, and when you're playful, there is creativity and joy and flow. Okay, thank you, Jet, for raising this topic. Thank you very much. Happy holidays. Lightness of being is the mantra.